Chapter 71 HeartNet, the ability to spy on other people's inner world. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As soon as the purple-robed man appeared in the hall, he used his ability to bewitch hundreds of humans, including many awakened ones. His strength left a deep impression on several people. They even thought that this purple-robed man was the final boss of this alien church stronghold. No one expected that they would encounter this awakened person with powerful spiritual powers in this room. You control these survivors and let them live in their own spiritual world. That's why they look so excited, but in fact they haven't come out of their fantasy world at all. Mu Qiu told the truth calmly. The purple-robed man was not angry at Mu Qiu's words. Instead, he looked at Mu Qiu with an appreciative tone. If I hadn't seen your abilities, I would have thought you were an awakened person with extraordinary spiritual talents. Boy, do you want to join? The purple-robed man was halfway through his words when he paused again. Hey, let's forget it. I prefer to strangle a genius like you in the cradle. TSK, 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 TSK. Listening to the purple-robed man talking to himself like a maniac, everyone couldn't laugh at all, and they were already on guard in their hearts. After all, this is a powerful existence that can easily confuse hundreds of humans. The ice-making boy's powers look familiar. If my guess is correct, it was you who destroyed Experiment 007, right? That everyone looked at each other in confusion, and then realized that the experimental product in the purple robe's mouth should be the big-headed monster baby that the team met in the hospital before. Now is the right time to settle the accounts from last time together. That as the purple-robed man spoke, an invisible spiritual wave that only Mu Qiu could feel spread through the room. Next, let me see the fear deep in your hearts, Jie Jie. Although he was right in front of them, the purple-robed man's words became softer and softer, until finally, they were as faint as mosquitoes in everyone's ears. The strange thing is that the surrounding scene gradually changes in front of everyone's eyes. Qing Fei. A familiar voice echoed in my ears. Concubine Liu Qing turned her head in a daze, only to find that she was in a ruins. Before she could figure out what was going on, the scene in front of her completely disrupted her thoughts. In front of her, a man in a suit was lying on the ground in a bloody state. Surrounded by a dozen zombies with ferocious faces and white pupils were eating the man's flesh and blood. In the distance, zombies kept rushing forward, biting and fighting for the man's body. This man covered in blood is his fiancée who has been missing for 2 years. Xu Feng. Liu Qingfei covered her mouth in disbelief and cried. She rushed forward to save the man, but found that her body was stuck in a mud wall and she couldn't move at all. She could only watch helplessly as the living limbs of her longing for husband were removed by zombies one after another, gnawing at the flesh crazily like a hungry beast. What's even more frightening is that her husband's head is facing her the whole time, his eyes are wide open, and his mouth is constantly wailing, "Save me! Save me, Concubine Qing! We agreed to get married. I am your husband, Concubine Qing. Why? Why don't you come to save me? Why?" The man's speech became faster and faster, and the questions from his mouth became more and more sharp, but the only thing that remained unchanged was his body that was eaten to a bloody pulp. Hearing her husband's questioning, Liu Qingfei couldn't help but shake her head, with tears on her face. "No, I have been looking for you for the past 2 years, You lied." The man scolded. "Did you fall in love with another man? You broke our agreement." "I didn't." Liu Qingfei looked directly at the man and shouted. The two looked at each other, and time seemed to freeze at this moment. "You don't love me anymore, right?" Suddenly, the man calmed down, and his remaining head looked at Concubine Liu Qing. A line of bloody tears flowed from the man's eyes. At this moment, Concubine Liu Qing finally couldn't hold back anymore and squatted on the ground, covering her ears and crying loudly. "Dad!" The 5-year-old daughter beside him handed the peeled apple to Chen Weiguo, who had just left the construction site, took the apple, rubbed his daughter's head, and smiled happily. The little girl seemed to have received some reward, and she jumped happily to the side. Chen Weiguo turned around and looked at his wife beside him. At this moment, the wife was carefully cutting another apple with a fruit knife and feeding it to her daughter's mouth, with a loving smile on her face. In this small rental house of less than 50 square meters, it seems that the most beautiful emotions in the world exist. Seeing this heartwarming scene, Chen Weigua somehow felt a warm current surge in his heart, and the fatigue of the day after work was swept away at this moment. He stepped forward and hugged his wife and daughter, secretly vowing to protect them no matter what, so that his wife and daughter could live a good life. But at the next moment, the door was suddenly slammed. Opened by a huge force, zombies covered in blood rushed in from outside the house. Chen Weigua's eyes were horrified, and he was instantly knocked down by several zombies. Severe pain came from his body, but he didn't care at all. In front of him were his wife and daughter, but they were also being eaten by several zombies. No. Watching his wife and daughter being bitten into two fleshless skeletons in front of his eyes, Chen Weigua was filled with misery and despair, and his calloused hands scratched the floor with blood marks. At the same time, the other members of the team were also experiencing the deepest fear in their hearts. The purple-robed man peeped into everyone's inner world, with a mocking sneer on his face. His ability was a spiritual power called HeartNet. He could easily probe his spiritual power into other people's inner world, urging the most vulnerable part of their hearts, so that they could be hypnotized or indulged in his own world. What he liked to appreciate most was the secrets buried deep in other people's hearts, which could easily destroy the fear in a person's heart. Whenever he saw the painful expressions on these people's faces, it would make his body tremble with excitement and his scalp numb. But suddenly, he found that the mental fluctuations of two people were extremely abnormal, and his own mind showed signs of backlash once he entered. This made the purple-robed man feel a little surprised, because he was a top-level A-level psychic. It can be said that except for the powerful S-level existences, these ordinary awakeners could not escape his mind net. His ability has been tried and tested on these awakeners, but now he has encountered two difficult existences at the same time. Thinking of this, the purple-robed man could not help but divide a part of his mental power, intending to personally enter the spiritual world of these two people to find out. Chapter 72 Mu Qiu's Spiritual World, The Frightened Purple-Robed Man. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. This girl. The purple-robed man's consciousness sank into the spiritual world of a girl wearing an orange-red goldfish suit below. Once the spiritual fluctuations he released before entered the girl's spiritual world, they were like mud sinking into the sea without any movement. This time, the purple-robed man's spiritual consciousness entered in person, but found that he was in the ruins of a city that had long been dead. Unlike the old cities in the real world, the buildings here were strangely destroyed and disintegrated by a kind of purple crystal. The seemingly gorgeous purple crystals were deeply embedded in the ground of the high-rise buildings, and they could not withstand the collapse and shattered in the next second. The whole world was empty and silent, as if it was on the verge of collapse at any time. In the distance, there was a blue beam of light rushing straight into the sky. The purple-robed man's spiritual body floated in the air and floated over, but saw that it was actually a towering tree made of purple crystals. On the trunk of the purple crystal giant tree, there was a woman who looked similar to the pink-haired girl outside, and her arms were tied up with a purple crystal chain. The purple-robed man was looking at the incredible purple crystal tree in surprise, but the girl tied to the tree suddenly opened her eyes. 2 bunches of pink hair were tied on her cheeks, and there was a faint smile in her purple-red pupils. She looked up at the purple-robed man floating in the air. Somehow, the purple-robed man was captured by the strange red pupils when he saw this woman for the first time, and his whole body trembled instantly. The purple-robed man looked at the woman with fear, and this spirit composed of spiritual energy fled from this strange spiritual world as fast as lightning. The purple-robed man who returned to the real world had cold sweat on his forehead and took a deep look at the pink-haired girl with closed eyes below. Just now, he had a glimpse of the pink-haired girl in the spiritual world, and he felt like he was going to be spiritually backfired. The purple-robed man who stabilized his mind planned to deal with other people first, and then contact his companions to control the girl. He was also very curious about what secrets were hidden in the girl's spiritual world. Thinking of this, the purple-robed man looked at Mu Qiu who was just below. He saw clearly on the monitor that this guy was an elemental awakener who used ice. It might be difficult for others to deal with him, but for him, this kind of awakener with weak spirit was the easiest to invade. His best ability was to disintegrate the enemy from the inside. This time, the purple-robed man immersed all his mind into Mu Qiu's inner world. He had already seen that Mu Qiu had the highest combat power in the entire team, and was also the focus of the purple-robed man's target. T-Online Novel Network. As usual, it was extremely simple to invade the mind of Mu Qiu, an A-level awakener. According to his previous experience, the more powerful the awakener, the more darkness and filth there is in his heart. The purple-robed man showed a happy smile on his face. He couldn't wait to see what the spiritual world of this rare elemental awakener was like. However, the moment the purple-robed man's spirit appeared in Mu Qiu's heart, the purple-robed man's face froze. What is this? What appeared in front of the purple-robed man was a brand new world he had never seen before. The boundless sea of fire spread across the sky, and the whole sky was burned by the thick fire. The hot flames surged like a wave, as if the next moment the sea of fire would be flooded and burn everything in the world. On the ground, thousands of miles of glaciers condensed the mountains, rivers and plants on the earth. Everything in sight was frozen, as if the biting ice from the Arctic invaded the entire land, but the whole world became a dividing line, dividing the upper and lower worlds of ice and fire. It was this extremely shocking scene that shocked the purple-robed man. He had peeked into the spiritual world of countless people, but never had a heart as grand and magnificent as this one. But in the middle of this world, a magnificent throne made of gorgeous amethysts descended into this world like a god. A black-robed figure sat on the amethyst throne, overlooking the world, as if everything in the world was an ant under his feet, looking down on the world. Behind the throne, a dark red dragon was circling around the purple crystal throne. The dragon galloped through the world, a pair of red eyes flashing, and flames rose and entangled in the body. The roar was even more earth-shaking and mighty, but such a terrifying dragon, which could span the sky and the earth, lowered its mighty head when it swam to the figure on the throne. Like an obedient kitten, the figure on the throne gently stroked the huge head of the dragon, and slowly turned his head to look at the purple-robed man floating in the air in the distance. When he saw the face on the throne clearly, a deep look of horror appeared in the pupils of the purple-robed man. The figure sitting on the throne was the target of his journey through the Sea of Heart, the awakener of the element system, Mu Qiu. He didn't understand why Mu Qiu's spiritual world was so vast and magnificent, and there was even such a terrifying existence as the red dragon. When Mu Qiu looked at him, his indifferent eyes showed a hint of amusement and smile. The purple-robed man was sweating profusely on his forehead, and subconsciously drove his spirit to escape from this sea of mind space. But he found that his spirit seemed to be imprisoned and could not break through this space at all. How is it possible? The purple-robed man was shocked. The Sea of Mind shuttle that had been successful before was out of function at this time. This situation will only happen if the opponent's strength is far greater than yours. The purple-robed man looked at Mu Qiu with horror, but found that Mu Qiu, who was wearing a black robe, was sitting on the purple crystal throne without moving. Mu Qiu patted the head of the red dragon lightly, and the red dragon looked in the direction of the purple-robed man, and its red pupils seemed to be burning with an endless sea of fire. The dragon's eyes showed a fierce look, roared, and danced with its huge body towards the purple-robed man. No. Don't. The fragile spirit of the purple-robed man was swallowed and burned by the huge dragon in an instant, leaving only a wailing scream between heaven and earth. He swallowed the purple-robed man's spirit into his stomach. His expression was shocked, and he roared to the sky. The red dragon returned to the purple crystal throne under Mu Qiu's seat. The world returned to silence again, and only the rolling sea of fire on the horizon made a dull sound from time to time. Mu Qiu stood quietly on the throne, and the world seemed to be silent, and the ferocious dragon behind him also dimmed. From a distance, the black figure on the purple crystal throne seemed to merge with the red dragon, indistinguishable from each other. Chapter 77 The Final Experiment Number 001, The Collapsed Club Building. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Xu Feng stepped slowly on the wall, and beneath him were roaring ferocious monsters, as if they would rush over and tear him to pieces in the next second. Hearing Xu Feng's mocking words, Xu Feng did not refute, but raised his arms, and the two gorgeous laser swords suddenly merged. Immediately, dozens of dangling white vortices suddenly appeared in the space around Xu Feng. In each illusory vortex, a white figure slowly walked out. Everyone looked closely and found that these dozens of figures were exactly the appearance of Xu Feng. Interesting. Mu Qiu stroked his chin, looking at the dozen or so Xu Feng who walked out of the space vortex, and a touch of interest appeared in his eyes. Then, the dozen or so Xu Feng who emerged from the vortex held two lightsabers in their hands, put their hands together and made the same action at the same time. as the two laser swords merged, a huge blue beam shot out. Xu Feng looked at the scene in front of him in horror, and his intuition told him that there was a fatal threat hidden in this laser. I saw more than a dozen Xu Feng put their laser swords together at the same time, surrounding Xu Feng and many human-faced monsters, and dozens of laser giant pillars exploded together, and the final target was Xu Feng. Not good. Xu Feng's heart was shocked, and what was reflected in his pupils was dense blue beams bombarding him directly. Boom! The earth-shattering attack shook the entire club building, and the tiles and stones flew, like an earthquake. The sound instantly alarmed the law enforcement team and the people of the heterogeneous church who were fighting fiercely on the side. Thick smoke enveloped the hall, and the ground where several monsters were originally located had been cracked and shattered by the powerful attack, and the red bricks of the carpet on the next floor were clearly visible. After the thick smoke, a figure in a white suit floated into the air. It was Xu Feng. It's the captain. Seeing Xu Feng's appearance, everyone in the law enforcement team was shocked, but at this moment, Xu Feng's face was no longer calm. The laser sword in his hand was dim, and the light curtain flashed under the lens, but his eyes were looking straight at the deep pit caused by the explosion directly below. Everyone looked at it intently, and saw a huge figure rolling in the huge pit. It was the S-level human-faced demon spider. However, the human-faced demon spider at this moment looked extremely tragic, with dark green blood all over its body, paralyzed limbs, and the tail that sprayed spider silk was even more scorched. This was all the result of the fierce attack of the laser cannon just now. On the other hand, most of the other A-level human-faced monsters were bombarded into slag, and those who survived also collapsed on the ground, bleeding like a fountain. Xu Feng climbed up from the belly of the human-faced demon spider. He had just hit in the chest and abdomen of the human-faced demon spider to survive this fatal blow. Xu Feng stood up in embarrassment, looking at Xu Feng with a strong fear in his eyes. He turned his head and looked at the alien cultists who were fighting with the law enforcement team and the awakened members of the search team. There were only a few alive at this moment. Good, very good. Xu Feng had an inexplicable smile on his pale face, which made people feel scared. Liu Qingfei in the crowd stared at Xu Feng in a daze. She could no longer recognize that this gloomy and terrifying monster like a vampire was her former fiancé. Xu Feng looked at Liu Qingfei affectionately. Dear, don't worry, no one can take you away from me. Don't you always want to destroy this place? Xu Feng's laughter was a little hysterical. In this case, I will let you witness the highest masterpiece in this base. Xu Feng suddenly bent down, his back bent into a strange arc, and then a pair of blood-red wings like a demon suddenly spread out from under his red robe. Xu Feng suddenly flew to a high altitude, took out a remote control device from his arms, and pressed it hard. He looked at Xu Feng and laughed wildly. White Death, be glad, because you will witness a miracle here. As soon as Xu Feng finished speaking, suddenly, the whole building began to shake violently like an earthquake. Look at that sphere. Everyone looked and saw that the surface of the giant pillar that was originally used to support the entire building gradually had layers of cracks emerging, followed by pieces of debris falling. The green sphere at the top of the giant pillar now looked more like a giant egg that nurtured life, and it seemed that something was about to break out of the shell. Witness it carefully. This is the experiment No. 001, that I have devoted all my efforts to. Xu Feng looked at the dark green sphere, and his eyes finally trembled a little. Inside, he felt a powerful energy fluctuation. Just as everyone was dumbfounded, the next moment, the dark green giant shell suddenly broke, followed by the shattering and collapse of the building's foundation pillar. What's going on? Feeling the ground shaking, everyone began to panic. Could it be that the giant pillar connecting the entire building is the body of this monster? Someone saw something and said this fact in a rolling throat. Now this monster is about to wake up, and the whole building is about to collapse. As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked beyond words, and they felt their heartbeats slowed down. The whole building was actually made up of a heretic. Xu Fengfei suddenly laughed in the air and said, it would take some time to wake it up. Thanks to you guys who provided so much fresh blood after you came in, it has finally been awakened now. The crowd then understood that this was the real purpose of the heterogeneous cult, to attract them to encircle and suppress them. including the zombies on each floor, which were all to provide nutrients for the monsters in this building. The ground under their feet suddenly began to crack inch by inch, and they heard the violent sounds of the floors below collapsing one after another. I believe that in a few minutes, the entire building will collapse and be destroyed. It's too late. Xu Feng's eyes flashed, and his figure flashed through the space and came to the law enforcement team, saying, "Leave here first." Xu Feng stretched out his hands to operate his supernatural power, and a white light curtain enveloped everyone. He wanted to use the ability of Space Shuttle to take everyone away. Just as his special power was flashing and he was about to activate it, a sinister and hoarse voice suddenly came, "Qing Fei, you are mine." The next moment, Xu Feng appeared from nowhere, broke through the defense of the space shield, and ran straight towards Liu Qing Fei in the crowd with a hideous face. Chapter 78 Desperate Situation, Long Lost System. Mu Qiu stepped forward. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The green rock walls around the hall began to shake violently, the whole building seemed to have lost its load-bearing bridge, and everyone felt the stairs below begin to break and collapse layer by layer. What's more terrifying is that after a fierce battle, the ground was already covered with human blood, and in the end, all the blood that formed a river actually flowed into the dark green sphere in the center of the hall. As the huge amount of blood flowed in, the eggshell-like sphere also accelerated its cracking speed, with a halo flickering on it, and dark green energy fragments fell like eggshells. Feeling the strong energy fluctuations coming from inside, Xu Feng's face finally became solemn. He used up all his superpowers to wrap the remaining search team and law enforcement team in a white space light shield. The energy in his body was instantly consumed, and Xu Feng's face turned pale at a speed visible to the naked eye. Xu Feng's mind moved, and he was about to use his ability to take dozens of people to shuttle through space, but suddenly, a blood-red figure suddenly broke a gap in the space barrier he set up, and swooped down towards one of the team. "Qing Fei, my wife, I will never lose you again this time." Xu Feng, dressed in a red robe, looked pale, with a pair of fangs clearly visible at the corners of his mouth. He was wearing a blood-red robe and floating in the air like a fierce vampire. Xu Feng. Liu Qingfei looked at her old lover in front of her. The completely subverted image made her unbelievable that the murderous demon in front of her was her kind and upright fiancé in the past. Liu Qingfei's steps began to retreat involuntarily, and the tears that had long dried up flowed down the corners of her eyes again. "No, you are not him, and the Xu Feng in my heart will never be like you." Liu Qingfei no longer had the gentle look of the past, and her expression when she looked at Xu Feng was full of strangeness. After hearing the ruthless words of Concubine Liu Qing denying their relationship, Xu Feng's face suddenly became fierce. "No, you are my wife, forever. Concubine Qing, follow me, I can bring you the life you want." Xu Feng's figure flashed, and the bloody figure quickly passed through the air, and his target was Concubine Liu Qing below. This is a fierce attack from an S-level awakener. Everyone was on guard, and several awakeners rushed forward to stop Xu Feng. Xu Feng's arm stretched out from his robe, and his nails stretched out and became extremely sharp, with a trace of blood flashing on them. Several strong mutant awakeners were pierced through the neck by Xu Feng's extended claws before they even had a face-to-face fight. In an instant, the blood in the bodies of several awakeners quickly flowed away, and they turned directly into shriveled corpses. Xu Feng, who pulled out his claws, rushed towards Concubine Liu Qing without any pause, and his twisted and open 5 fingers seemed to have sworn his control over the beauty in front of him. Liu Qingfei looked at her husband who was getting closer and closer to her, and she couldn't help but feel an extreme fear in her heart. In despair, she subconsciously raised her arms and closed her eyes in despair, but after waiting for a moment, the familiar and crazy voice in her ear stopped abruptly. Liu Qingfei raised her head, but saw a slender and tall figure blocking her way. The familiar black windbreaker fluttered, just like a god blocking the horrible disaster ahead for Liu Qingfei. Mu Qiu. Liu Qingfei never thought that when she was desperate, the person who stood in front of her was actually this cold-blooded boy who disagreed with her ideas and even had some grudges. Xu Feng's forehead was bulging with veins. Looking at the ice double blades blocking his claws, his fangs and teeth flashed with a sinister cold light. "You are looking for death." Mu Qiu raised the corner of his mouth, and while blocking Xu Feng's way, he turned his head to look at the urban beauty behind him and smiled. "This is not like your style, my great saint." In fact, Mu Qiu just watched this family drama with a mentality of watching the excitement, but a familiar and cold mechanical voice suddenly came in his mind, which directly shocked Mu Qiu. Ding! Congratulations to the host for checking in at the Great World Entertainment Club and unlocking the reward. Nija's mask can summon the Shadow Army. The next check-in location, the final battle of the Redemption Battlefield, and the reward is a random devil fruit from the One Piece plane. I hope the host will keep up the good work, and the Great World sign-in system will always be with you. The cold mechanical voice fell silent again, as if everything that just came to his ears was a fantasy. Because of this, Mu Qiu fought desperately to resist Xu Feng's attack for Liu Qing. Hearing Mu Qiu's usual teasing words, looking at the tall and broad back in front of her, Liu Qing's eyes became wet again for some reason. Mu Qiu looked at the vampire who was only a few feet away from him again, with an inexplicable meaning in his eyes. "Now, let me play with you." Mu Qiu's ice blades rushed forward, and then his body shook, and he stepped on the ice and rushed to the far side of the hall. At the same time, Xu Feng also used Space Shuttle to attack Xu Feng, and many awakened people from the law enforcement team appeared in front of Liu Qing. Mu Qiu's words were no less than sarcastic ridicule in Xu Feng's eyes, and he saw that the great opportunity had been lost. Xu Feng was angry and turned his blood wings open, and turned to fly towards Mu Qiu. The rock wall beside everyone began to collapse, and the bricks and stones under their feet began to fall. Xu Feng looked in the direction of Mu Qiu in the distance, but time was obviously not enough for him to rescue Mu Qiu. Xu Feng's mind moved, and his space ability was activated. A white mist flashed in the space barrier that engulfed everyone, and then an illusory vortex swallowed everyone directly. Everyone felt the rapid airflow around them, and in the blink of an eye they had appeared on a floor where zombies were cleared before. Similarly, the collapse of this floor was more serious, and the rubble of the ceiling fell like a meteorite. The next moment, another white light flashed, and everyone kept shuttling through the building more than 10 stories high. Xu Feng, who led everyone to shuttle through space, had sweat on his forehead. With so many people in a large-scale space crossing, such a huge load was already unbearable for him. "Wait! Mu Qiu is still inside!" Wei Linger shouted at Xu Feng. Xu Feng glanced at Wei Linger with a calm expression. The middle-aged man beside him hurriedly explained, "It's too late, Yu Feng's body can't hold on any longer." Wei Linger looked at the constantly changing scene in front of her, and her worries about Mu Qiu could not be any greater. Qi stood beside Wei Linger, staring blankly at the direction upstairs. Qiu. Chapter 79, Xu Feng's Shock, the Real Monster. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On the other side, in the collapsing rooftop of the club, looking at the people who had completely disappeared, Xu Feng, wearing a red robe and looking like a vampire, gritted his teeth and looked at Mu Qiu in front of him with murderous intent. It was because of this man that he failed to take Liu Qing away in the end. "It doesn't matter." Xu Feng laughed in a deep voice, "I'll deal with you first, and I can take Qing away after the number 1 experiment wakes up. None of you can escape." Mu Qiu suddenly laughed, still looking free and easy. "Are you so sure that you can deal with me?" A powerful energy wave suddenly erupted from Xu Feng's body, with great momentum. This is a powerful energy that only S-level beings can possess. The energy in Xu Feng's body was stimulated to the extreme. He suddenly threw away his blood-red robe, and the clothes inside burst with it, revealing a strong, like a beast with explosive power. This is the powerful body nourished by the blood essence he absorbed. Mu Qiu was amazed. This body alone was comparable to the previous Jin Xiong with the unparalleled strange power ability, and even better. Xu Feng looked at Mu Qiu with a bloodthirsty look in his eyes and grinned. "Don't worry, I won't kill you immediately. I will keep you in captivity and make you my blood food. Zizi, I haven't tasted the taste of the awakened blood of the elemental system yet." Mu Qiu lowered his head and murmured, "I'd love to see you, let me see what's so great about you." Xu Feng suddenly saw that the corners of Mu Qiu's lowered mouth suddenly opened a strange arc, and the black robe behind him moved without wind. Then he muttered with a faint excitement, "Pleasure me. Ants." An unimaginable shocking wave suddenly rushed into the sky like a surging wave. The entire building even accelerated the process of collapse because of this extremely powerful energy fluctuation. This. What is this? Xu Feng's eyes widened. He suddenly found that this powerful fluctuation that made his soul tremble appeared from Mu Qiu in front of him. At the same time, the remaining members of the search team and the law enforcement team kept shuttling in the space light shield condensed by Xu Feng. After just a dozen breaths, everyone came to the outside of the club building. Xu Feng manipulated the space light shield to lead everyone forward hundreds of meters, and then lifted the huge space barrier. At this time, Xu Feng's face was extremely pale, and his forehead was soaked with sweat. The chest part of the white suit rose and fell rapidly, and Xu Feng covered his chest and gasped heavily. In just a dozen breaths, every second was squeezing the few energies in his body. And just a few seconds after everyone arrived safely on the ground, the towering building hundreds of meters behind them also collapsed in an instant. The loud noise of the building collapsing continued throughout the city center, instantly attracting the attention of a large group of zombie heretics around. What is that? Before everyone recovered from the disaster, some survivors pointed at the collapsed building behind them and exclaimed. A towering tree rose from the collapsed building, reaching a height of more than 10 feet straight into the sky. The giant tree was a strange dark green color, with no leaves on the branches, but instead layers of thick vines like tentacles. In the center of the trunk, there was a terrifying wide vertical eye, which suddenly opened and stared at the many survivors below. It was just born and was extremely eager for this kind of blood food full of vitality. As the shocking supernatural power fluctuations came, the middle-aged man next to Xu Feng breathed a sigh of relief, but the cautious look on his face was still strong. It has not reached the level of destruction, but this monster is also at the top level in S level just based on the level of supernatural power. It's really extreme. This alien cult actually intends to use the resources of the entire NaN city to create a destructive existence, that it has not reached the level of destruction yet. This means that everyone still has a glimmer of hope. Xu Feng nodded and did not speak. At this moment, a monster-like roar came from behind the crowd. It's zombies. A lot of zombies. Everyone turned around suddenly and saw that a large number of zombie monsters had gathered behind them at some point. The dense crowds of people were rushing towards the survivors. They were all attracted by the sound of the building collapsing. In an instant, the human camp fell into an embarrassing situation of being surrounded by enemies and attacked from all sides. Looking at the survivors who were depressed and desperate, Xu Feng made an amazing move. He took out a copper box from his arms, which contained capsule-shaped medicine. Seeing the box of medicine, the middle-aged man next to Xu Feng exclaimed, "Yu Feng, are you crazy? You have taken this medicine once before. If you take it again, your body will not be able to bear this load." Hearing the threatening words of the middle-aged man, Xu Feng took out a few capsules and swallowed them directly as if he had never heard of it before. In an instant, veins on Xu Feng's forehead popped up, and a look of pain appeared on his face. Xu Feng endured the strong discomfort in his body and took out the two long Doradied laser sword handles from his waist. He took out two blue crystal cores from his arms and stuffed them into the lower end of the hilts. He clenched his hands and exerted force, and the two laser swords flashed dazzling light again. The moment he held the hilts, the light screen in Xu Feng's glasses flashed, and his eyes became as sharp as an eagle's eye. The scene returned to a few minutes ago, when the 14-story building was on the verge of collapse. Debris was scattered, and the collapsed boulders poured madly towards the floor tiles. Xu Feng, with a shriveled body, fell to the ground. His chest was pierced by a giant icicle, and his abdomen was burned black by the flames, as if it would fall apart into dust if the wind blew. Xu Feng looked terrified, and the horror in his eyes was almost overflowing, and blood was constantly seeping out of his mouth. How? How is it possible? How can a human have such power? Monster! You are the real monster. He never thought that as a vampire, he would be sucked dry and devoured by someone one day. Beside him, a man in a black windbreaker walked slowly, not paying any attention to the rubble that kept falling down around him. Mu Qiu turned a deaf ear to Xu Feng's panicked and shocked words, and walked to a wall of the hall leisurely. The wall was full of masks used in masquerade balls. and in the center of these masks, a mask that was as hideous as a demon but familiar to Mu Qiu came into view. Finally. I found you. Chapter 80 Xu Feng's last words, the trembling General Niga. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A demon mask with two horns on its head, a red face and fangs appeared in Mu Qiu's hand. Nijia's mask is one of the masks of the 9 ghost generals in the Black Shadow Corps. The person wearing this mask will be influenced and controlled by the soul of the ghost general sealed in it, tempting the wearer to release the darkness deep in his heart and summon soldiers belonging to the Black Shadow Corps. And Nijia's mask can summon the most common ninja group in the Black Shadow Corps, the Holy Lord once fought in all directions with this mask, and the ninja group also made immortal military achievements for the Holy Lord, the ancient demon. Now, this mask is in Mu Qiu's hands, because the animation Jackie Chan Adventures does not exist in this parallel world. Mu Qiu is not worried that the mask will be recognized. After looking at the hideous mask in his hand for a while, Mu Qiu smiled and shook his head. If it weren't for the fact that a ghost general of the Black Shadow Kingdom was sealed in it, it would only be a scary prop for Halloween. On the surface, the surrounding walls began to collapse rapidly, and the rubble on the ceiling splashed and fell. Mu Qiu was standing in the center of this earthquake at this moment. The first thing Mu Qiu did after getting the mask was not to put it on his face, but to slowly walk to the figure lying on the ground in the distance. Faint footsteps came from the front. The haggard Xu Feng barely opened his heavy eyes, but saw Mu Qiu's handsome face with a smile. I'm more curious. How did you become like this when you were so upright in front of the Holy Mother Lu? Or is that the heterogeneous church really so attractive? Mu Qiu squatted down, rubbed his eyes with one hand, and had a playful look on his face. The rocks that hit him were all blocked and bounced away by a thick ice wall without exception. Xu Feng's throat rolled. Now he was just a spent force. In this state, even speaking would take all his strength. Do you know what I've been through in the past 2 years? Xu Feng's face had long since turned into that of a normal person, with a bitter smile on his lips. In this wasteland, I've seen people bullying people, people killing people, people eating people. In this cruel apocalypse, human nature is far more terrifying than zombie monsters. Xu Feng's pupils widened, as if he saw something he longed for, and he stretched out his hand to grab the void. Only with real power can you survive here. I want to survive. I want to bring Qing Fei a better life. I want to be the real king of this area. Xu Feng grinned and said bitterly, heterogeneous church, I don't care what kind of cult it is, as long as it can give me the power to surpass all living beings, I can help it do things. Mu Qiu smiled, you see it clearly, but unfortunately, you still lost in the end. It was not unfair for Xu Feng to be defeated by Mu Qiu, the corpse king who ruled a region. Yes, I lost miserably. At this time, Xu Feng seemed to have returned to his original self, the honest and kind husband in Lu Qingfei's mouth. Now I am no longer worthy of being Qingfei's husband. I hope you can take good care of her. It turned out that Xu Feng saw Mu Qiu stand up to save Lu Qingfei, so he thought that Lu Qingfei had already been Mu Qiu's woman. You seem to have something. I have nothing to do with that Lu Xingmu. Mu Qiu was a little amused. The reason why he just showed up was entirely because of the appearance of the system. He took this opportunity to stay in order to get the mask, but Xu Feng turned a blind eye to Mu Qiu's words. Obviously, he didn't want to say anything more about the relationship between the two. Experimental subject, 001, was cultivated by me with all my efforts. His strength is also at the top of the S level. Protect Qingfei. Suddenly, Xu Feng laughed at himself again. That's right, with your strength, my worry is unnecessary. Looking at Xu Feng talking to himself, Mu Qiu's forehead was covered with black lines. This is the first person who made Mu Qiu speechless. Well, Mu Qiu decided to name him Su Dazue. But Xu Feng's voice became weaker and weaker. Lanan City was originally the territory of a destructive, terrifying existence. We reached an agreement with her to establish a base here. Be careful of her. When he said this, the focus in Xu Feng's eyes had completely dimmed. He stretched out his bony hands to grab the air and said hoarsely in a weak voice. I am unwilling, this Damn, end of the world. Xu Feng's raised head completely drooped, and there was still a deep attachment and unwillingness in his pupils. Looking at Su Dazue, who had completely lost his breath, Mu Qiu slowly stood up. At the same time, he also retracted his palm that was emitting the healing halo of the horse spell. Xu Feng's state was already exhausted. If Mu Qiu hadn't used the healing power of the horse spell to prolong his life, the former would never have said so many last words. For Mu Qiu, there are certainly many ways to save Xu Feng. However, it is possible to save him, but it is not necessary. After all, it is Su Dazue. After sending Su Dazue away, Mu Qiu lowered his head and looked at the red mask in his hand. Ghost General. Then let me see how powerful he is. Mu Qiu opened his 5 claws and took the mask, gently covering his face with it. Instantly, a thick black gas visible to the naked eye spread out from the hideous mask. Mu Qiu's figure also grew several times in an instant, and a pair of devil-like black wings broke through the wide windbreaker and spread out from behind him. These devil-like wide wings are the ability he gained after swallowing Xu Feng's superpowers just now. Mu Qiu's skin surface also slowly climbed, and the red lines continued to spread. Even Mu Qiu's eyes gradually turned red, and a dragon tail was faintly emerging behind him. This is the rhythm of transforming into the Flame Demon Lord. Following the changes in Mu Qiu's body, the black gas emitted from the mask became more and more dense, and finally the black gas filled with dark power directly spread throughout the entire floor. He. At the same time, a gloomy voice came from Mu Qiu's mind. A tall figure wearing samurai armor appeared in Mu Qiu's mind. On his face was a hideous demon mask, which was the evil soul sealed in the mask. Niga, the leader of the ninja group and one of the 9 ghost generals. General Niga is resurrected. The eerie voice echoed in the dark space. Niga opened his red eyes from the darkness, and he couldn't wait to devour those dark souls. Young man, do you desire power? Niga walked out of the darkness slowly, and his words were full of temptation. Power? Suddenly, a more gloomy voice echoed in this dark space. Before Niga recovered, he saw a monster several feet tall, with a red body, a dragon head and a human body walking out of the darkness. The power of ants. The voice of the Flame Demon Lord was heavy and low, and his tone was full of disdain and contempt. You are. Niga looked at the intimidating Flame Demon Lord, his red eyes were horrified, and his voice trembled. P.S. Friends who like this book, please don't forget to give it a 5-star rating. Your support and encouragement are the author's unremitting motivation for writing. Love you.